Welcome to the Women at the Top podcast interview series. My name is Regina Barr, and I'm the founder of the Women at the Top Network, and I will be your host today. Women at the Top is a community of like-minded women who share the what, vision, and mission. And our goal, simply put, is to empower aspiring women to lead. And we do this in a couple of ways, by providing information, training, and connections. And I'm so excited to tell you that joining me today is Michelle Perdue, author of Rise and Shine, How to Live a Life of Resilience and Perform at Your Potential. And before we get started, I want to tell you just a little bit about Michelle. Michelle is a resilience keynote speaker, author, and coach. She helps employee-centered organizations cultivate the resilience necessary to minimize workplace stress, increase work productivity, and optimize health and well-being. She's worked with some of the most formidable companies, including Land O'Lakes, Johnson & Johnson, and Ecolab, just to name a few. When she's not speaking, she enjoys acting and writing poetry. One of her most notable film roles can be seen in the award-winning film Turnip Seed. She believes her creative abilities and commitment to self-expression is what has helped her to rise and shine. And it's her firm belief that when she shines, she empowers others to shine even brighter. Her goal, to foster resilience and change lives. On that note, welcome to the podcast today, Michelle.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you here. And I do have a copy of your book. So hopefully people will check out your book, and we'll be talking about your book throughout our time together today. So I'm going to jump right in and get us started. And for those that have been with me before, they know that I love to ask a backstory, or hear the backstory from our authors. So tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write this book, and really, what does it mean to rise and shine?
That's a really great question, Regina. The reason why I wrote this book is simply because I truly wanted to make a difference. And I have to tell you, it took me a while to come to that realization, because growing up as a child, I did not always feel as if I had a voice. I was never asked, Michelle, what do you want to be when you grow up, or anything of that nature. So I never really felt as if what I had to say was truly valuable. So fast forward to today, I have come to realize that I do have a voice and it does matter. So that is what inspired me to want to share my messages, to tell my stories, to share my poetry, in hopes that I can help someone to go from where they are today to ultimately where they want to be tomorrow.
It's so interesting that you talked about your voice. I know personally for myself that growing up, I had some trauma and I felt like I lost my voice. And it took me into my adulthood to really find my voice as well. So I love that you shared that, because I do think a lot of women do struggle to find their voice in many ways. So appreciate that thought. So let's talk a little bit about what's been going on in the world. Over the past 2 years, I've personally had many conversations about resilience in the workplace. And I think it's such an incredibly important topic, because in the workplace, I don't know if you find this, we don't talk about mental health, right? So we have to find a way to talk about health and well-being that resonates in the workplace. And I have found that the word resilience does resonate, and it's a way for us to bring that into the workplace. So in your book, you focus on resilience specifically. So tell us, what is resilience to you, and tell us why this is so important right now.
Resilience for me is ultimately about having the fortitude to overcome your failures, your flaws, and your frustrations, so that ultimately that you can really show up as the person that you want to be. It's about really, coming to terms with who you are and being okay with that. Saying that, I accept who I am in all aspects of my being, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And whatever is broken in my life, I have the power to fix it. I may not have the resources at the time, but I know how to reach out. I know how to go beyond myself to get what I need in order for me to rise and shine and to be ultimately to be the best version of who I am.
I think that's a very powerful message, because what I hear you saying is that you may not have the resources, but the power is within you to do or what you need to do to change your circumstances or to move yourself forward. And I think so often people make the mistake of they sort of delegate that power outside of themselves. And I think that is a mistake. So I'm happy to hear you talking about this message of that people specifically have the power to facilitate change or whatever it is that they're wanting to do. And I'm sure you would agree. And you mentioned, or didn't say this word, but people are resourceful. They have the means to figure out where to go or who to talk to or how to get that help. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And to be quite honest with you, I wish more people knew that, because I believe that if people really understood how powerful they really are and how capable they are, I think that we would find less suicides. I
Hmm.
will find people who are less dependent on drugs and alcohol, where they wouldn't feel the need to go outside of themselves to find solutions to their problems. But I truly believe that we are innately born to be resilient. And it's just a matter of listening to our inner voice and using that as a navigational system to help guide us, to get us to the place where we want to be. And unfortunately, the world, creates a lot of noise and a lot of static that drowns out our inner voice. And because of that, it really stifles us, and it keeps us small in the world. And my point is that in writing this book, I don't want you to be small. I want you to rise and shine to be the best of who you are. And so ultimately, that's what I believe my calling is to
That's
help
wonderful.
people to find that truth and to live it.
Well, we certainly need that now. And as you know, we kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier. Life is full of challenges, and I think how we respond to them really helps to build our resilience. And I think one of the nice things about your book is it provides tangible tools to help people survive life's challenges. So, with that, share a few of the tools with us that can apply to our lives or to our careers to cultivate that resilience.
Yes, Regina. You know what? In my book, I talk about understanding what your season is. And my point in that is saying that I want to inspire you and to encourage you to embrace your season and not your reason. And let me explain what I mean by that. Sometimes when we are not as successful as we want to be, or when we are comparing ourselves to other people and we feel as if we are getting the short end of the stick, so to speak, uh, I want to remind people to embrace their season and not the reason, meaning we are always giving ourselves excuses of why we're not successful. But sometimes we have to take a step back and truly understand what season we are in, because sometimes we want to be in full bloom. And I'm using this, Regina, as a metaphor.
Hmm.
Want to be in full bloom. We want to have it all. We want to have, we want the success. We want the accolades. We want the money, right? But sometimes based on where we are in life, we're not meant at that particular time in that season to have those things. So instead of looking at the season that we're in and embracing that and saying, you know what? I need more tools. I need more resources. I need to invest in my skill set or my mindset so that I can go from this the fall to the winter months to the spring, then to the summer. Because what happens is in the spring months, right? That's when you're starting to plant those seeds, right? But
Hmm.
planting the seeds and investing in yourself, then guess what? When summer comes, you're not going to be able to reap the harvest that you so want to have. So my thing is this: Put your time in, become a student of you, really understand who you are and where you're at, and stop comparing yourself to other people, places, and things so that you can go from where you are to the season that you want to be.
I think that's a great message. And I love how you talked about investing that time in yourself. And I think that's a mistake a lot of women make, in that they don't take the time to invest themselves. They're investing it in their jobs, in their kids, in their family, and all of these other things outside of themselves. And so I love that message. And if I hope if people don't take anything else away from our time together today, it's that invest in yourself, take that me time. And I love that, recognizing the season and using the season to your advantage so that it's helping to move you along on your path, whatever that path might be.
Absolutely, Regina.
So I found it very interesting. You have a background in writing poetry. I do not have a background in writing poetry, but I still remember a haiku I wrote in second grade. So I don't know what that tells you about me, but there you have it. So tell us a little bit about how that background in writing poetry influenced writing this book.
Yes. Well, first, let me just tell you how I started writing poetry.
Okay.
In California, and I was going to an audition for the Vagina monologues. I'm not for sure if you know Eve Ensler and her whole story in terms of shining light on women who have been abused. And she has all these beautiful monologues. And on my way to the audition, I decided that I wanted to write my own monologue. And as I was sitting at home writing my monologue, for some reason, my thoughts were coming out in the form of poetry rather than words. And so rather than question that, I truly embraced it. And then from that point on, I, continued writing poetry, and that's allowed me to have the poetry CDs that I have today, and the poetry that's in the book Rise and Shine.
That's wonderful. I think sometimes we think of poetry and we think that it's in some ways inaccessible, if you will. I think a lot of us remember reading poetry in high school and things like that. And it's interesting because, again, I don't read a lot of poetry, but I am going to check out some of yours. But I recently came across an interesting poem. It was by Portia Nelson, and it's called Autobiography in 5 Chapters. And it really strikes me. It was a very simple poem about how people get into ruts and habits and routines that don't serve them. So I love bringing poetry into what I would consider a more non-traditional environment, like the workplace. So I would encourage everyone who's listening in today or viewing us today to take some time and check out some of your poetry, because I think when you're investing in yourself and in you personally, finding different ways to access yourself and challenge your thinking is a good thing. So you've inspired me to want to seek out more poetry.
Thank you. And so, Regina, I just heard that you use the words. It's a way to access yourself, and it's so true. Me being able to write poetry and include it in my book is allowed me to demonstrate and show a different side of who I am. And honestly, when I'm speaking and I'm on stage, it allows me to connect with my audience in a way that my words, just words themselves, for instance, when I'm just speaking, doesn't allow me to do. For instance, when I am reciting poetry, it allows me to get physical, get animated, and really show up in a way that I wouldn't have otherwise. So that in and of itself means a lot to me, because as I said, it allows me to really connect with my audience in a
That's wonderful.
deeper way.
That's wonderful. And even just seeing you talk about it, you get so expressive. So you're a testimony to that right on our podcast today. So I believe that sometimes we create the event or write the book that we are seeking. Okay, I find this to be true for myself. A couple of years ago, I was seeking some rejuvenation, and my assistant and I decided we were going to do a spa day and invite corporate women. So I truly believe we seek those things out. So tell us, what did you learn about yourself as you were writing the book? Uh, was this something you were seeking, or tell us a little bit about that? What did you learn?
Yes, what I learned was my life is truly made up of many different stories, like so many of us as people. And what I've learned is to accept the good, the bad, and the ugly. Meaning, as I've written this book, I've gone back to each chapter and I have realized that my chapters in my book are comprised of, you know, some of the good that some of my successes, the things that I've achieved, but also the things that I've had to overcome. And I think that it's important that when you're telling your stories, that you embrace all of you, because sometimes we can single out a particular story and we can replay that story over and over again in our heads. And sometimes it's stories that do not serve us, that do not propel us to advance us in our lives and our careers. So it's helped me to remind myself that don't just single out one story, but to look at my life as a collage of stories, to be reminded of um, everything that I've gone through. And because of those different stories, it's allowed me to be where I am today.
I'm glad you talked about those stories. I find that sometimes we embellish stories in a way that don't serve us any longer. So I'm glad that you're making that point. Each year I try to pick a word to influence my year, if you will. And just coming, out of the past 2 years with the pandemic, the word I picked was flourish. And I use that to measure and evaluate, is this something that's helping me to flourish? And if it's
Mm.
not, I want to make a different choice, right? Because otherwise I can get in a rut and seeking out and telling those same stories to myself over and over when I really am wanting to move on and grow in a different way now. So I love that what you're talking about with putting that book together and why it's so important. So tell us, you've talked a little bit about your writing kryptonite. What is that?
Oh, my writing kryptonite. My writing kryptonite is simply embracing my passion for writing. Meaning, when I am passionate about something, that's when I truly do my best writing. When I'm passionate about something, it allows me to be more confident. It allows me to feel as if I can take more risks in my writing, and it also makes me feel as if my writing is grounded, meaning it gives me something to fight for when it's something that I'm passionate about. And so, and this is what I want to say to anyone who inspires to write, whether it's a memoir or whatever it may be, to write something that makes your heart smile, write something that's emotionally charged. Because when you do that, you allow yourself to go to a whole nother place. You allow yourself to unlock these emotional doors, if you will, so that people have a different aspect of your life when you allow yourself to do that.
Well, I'm glad that you talked about that passion and accessing those emotions, because that's a great segue to my next question for you. So you're a trained actress, you're a member of the Screen Actors Guild, and you're an award-winning poet. So tell us, when writing this book, what was the most difficult part of your artistic process, given what you just told us?
What was the most difficult part? I would have to say, well, let's talk about it in terms of writing poetry, writing in general, and then me writing this memoir. So, as a poet, poetry is very it's rhythmic. Poetry is visual. When you're writing poetry, you want to be visual, right? So it's innately it attracts people to want to listen to you when you're writing poetry. Um, Also, when you're writing, for instance, a screenplay, as you mentioned, I'm a member of the Screen Actors Guild. And when I think about the screenplays that I've read, and I think about how the writer has structure to the screenplay to make the audience more engaged and to keep them captivated, so that when the protagonist is confronted with this inciting incident, that it takes the audience on this journey. And so the writer has to be very intentional about um, how they transport the audience into this whole other world. Well, for me, as the author of this book, Rise and Shine, this memoir, it was challenging to me in this sense. When I would tell my own stories, they were not necessarily innately interesting, or I didn't rely on the stories themselves to keep my audience engaged. So I had to be very strategic and intentional about how my story unfolded. So it was more challenging in that sense.
Okay.
I had to kind of create those hills and valleys in that story to make sure that my reader would want to turn to the next page, and then the next page, and then so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's a great message too, because in the workplace, very often we inspire people with stories. And so, even for those listening or watching today, the ability to tell a story and engage an audience, whether that's in the corporate world or anywhere in your life, it's a great skill to have. So,
Absolutely. And Regina, I'm glad that you mentioned that about storytelling in the workplace, because so often it's so underestimated. Sometimes when we're coming to work, we feel as if we have to leave part of our humanity, outside the door. At work,
mhm,
we don't bring our full selves. And part of bringing our full selves is being able to come and share our stories. And I think sometimes we don't realize that we're already telling stories. When we come to work and someone says, Regina, how was your day at work? Or how was your weekend? Right? How was your weekend? Right? That's a story. Or Regina, how was your vacation? That's
mhm.
a story. But what I want to remind people, because we're talking about this at the moment, is that when you do tell your stories, make sure you're not talking about all of your successes. Make sure that you are being inclusive and you're also sharing some of that mess. Meaning, I myself, I'm more uh, inspired by someone who doesn't just share with me all their successes. Well, I want to know is, how did you get there? What were some of the struggles and the challenges and the obstacles that
Mhm.
you had to go through in order to be there? See,
I
that is what would captivate my attention. So I just want a
yes.
reminder.
Yeah, that's a great reminder, right? That's people want to see that no matter where they're at in their current career or their current role in life or current place in life,
Yes,
that they can go from here to there and that others have done it. And that may not be the same exact way, but that's how we inspire and motivate other people to know that they can do it too. So
absolutely.
let's talk a little bit about your role as an actor versus your role as an author. What's same or different about writing versus acting?
Wow. What's the same or different? Well, let's talk about what's the same. As an actress, when I am studying a role, it's important for me to understand what I bring to the role. It's important for me to do some soul searching and to really understand who I am as a person so that I can bring this character to life. Because if I don't truly understand who I am, then I can't be true to that character. I can't be authentic, be the authentic me, but I also can't truly bring that character to life. And the same works for when I'm writing. I think that it's important to understand who I am as a person, particularly when I'm writing this memoir. When you're writing a memoir, it's an opportunity to be very intimate with yourself, to really get in touch with all of your being, and to really become a student of you. Because when you become a student of you, you're able to write in a way that you're informed. And when you're informed about yourself, people are attracted to that.
Mm-hmm.
Are really attracted to that. And because you also allow yourself to write in a whole different way, you're not just having your readers to see you in black and white, but you're able to have them see all these different colors of who you are. And I think that that's really important.
I think that's a great point to make, that it also kind of brings me back to what you said earlier about bringing your whole self to the workplace, or your whole self to what you're doing. And I think what you just talked about allows you to do that. And I want to bring up something that I know you've been open about, and on your website, that you're a breast cancer survivor. And I am not a survivor. That's one of the times it's positive to say you're not a survivor. But I did spend 15 years serving on the board of the Breast Cancer Education Association after losing a very good friend of mine to breast cancer. So you've put it out there, you've done so much to impact the lives of others. So where do you go from here in terms of how you hope to impact the lives of others?
Well, I want to impact the lives of others in various ways. For instance, I want to continue doing my work in the workplace in terms of, doing keynote presentations and facilitating workshops. But aside from that, I'm looking forward to writing a screenplay and starring in my own film and having the topic be on resilience so that I can reach a bigger audience. I'm looking forward to doing more partnerships. For instance, I uh, produced a CD on poetry for cancer survivors. And I know in October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So I'm open to partnering with other organizations, possibly putting on an event to where I can perform some of my poetry. I'm looking forward to doing that. Yes.
Wonderful. Well, if I can help make some connections with the organization I was involved with, happy to do that.
Thank you, Regina.
Yes. So we are winding down on our time. It always goes so quickly. But before we go, if you had one piece of advice that you can offer to our listeners or viewers today, what would that be?
I would say, Regina, to understand what your why is. WHY. Sometimes we do things in life because of what other people want us to do or what we think we should do. And I want to remind people to really understand what is your motivation for doing the things that you want to do. Because to be quite honest with you, that has a lot to do with resilience in order for you to truly bounce back or even bounce forward in your life, is to understand your why. Why are you doing what you're doing?
I
Now,
love that.
example of this, really, I'm going to give you an example. Several months ago, when I had an opportunity to be in a film here in the Twin Cities, and the film was called None of Mine, and it was a short film for the 48-hour film festival. And for some reason, I received my script. I didn't receive my script in time, and so by the time I made it on set, all the other actors had their script except me. So as you can imagine, I was a bit stressed. I wasn't very happy. And the whole time I'm thinking, you know, I'm supposed to be on set. I know where I'm supposed to be, but I'm still in makeup and all these things are going through my head. And I really wanted to go to the person who was supposed to give me my script and just really, question her as to why I didn't have my script. So once I did get my script, I prepared as much as I could. And I realized in that moment, I said to myself, Michelle, you speak on the topic of resilience. If anyone can come through this, you can come through this. So instead of focusing on who did not give me my script, where I should have been at that moment and when I should have been there, I started to focus on my why. I said to myself, Michelle, why are you here? So I made my why bigger than the situation. And because I made my why bigger than the situation, I was able to connect with my scene partner on a whole different level. And long story short, I ended up winning the Best Supporting Actress for my role.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
Congratulations. Well, what a perfect way to end our time together today, understanding your why. And I also want to point out something else you said, which really resonated with me. It's not just about bouncing back, but it's about bouncing forward. So on that note, I want to say thank you so much for being here with us today, Michelle. That does conclude our interview with Michelle Perdue. And just a reminder, you can learn more about Michelle at www.michelle with 2 L's Perdue speaks.com. So thanks again for being here, Michelle. And don't forget to visit reginabarr.com, where you can learn more about upcoming podcasts and other events under the event page. So with that, thank you all for joining us today and have a great day.